Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do some coding exercises regarding the local and global variables. We would like to write a program that declares a global variable to store a counter. So the program should have two functions. One increment counter, and this function should increment the counter by 1. And we have the main function, of course, which calls the increment counter function twice and displays the updated counter value each time. So now we know that we need to have a global variable. We need to declare a global variable. Then we need to have one function here and one function here. And so the main function is going to call the other function twice, and the other function needs to increment the counter or the global function by one value. So to do that, we start by declaring the global function. We know that from before the global function, the global variable should be declared above the code and outside of any function. So this is the global function xy, we name it and we initialize it to be 0. Then here we have the main function, and here is the increment counter function. In order to have a review, we know that a function has three associated data with it. So when we are declaring it, so now here it's the name of the function. Before the name is either void or the output of the function. So here, if it was instead of void, we had integer. We knew that the function should give us an integer value in the end, and so it returns one integer value. But because this function is returning nothing, we have the void function. And also within the parentheses, we will have the input variables of the function. So in this case, we have no input function, so we can just call the function without giving any input to it. So, and this is how we declare and define a function. And we know that we must declare the function a priori to the main function. However, for definition of a function in this part, we can do it either before the main function or after the main function. So it's up to you. Here, I'm declaring and defining at the same place before the main function. And here, what it's going to do is that it's going to get this xy and increment its current value by 1. So, and we learned that plus equal something means something like this. So instead of plus equal, we could write xy plus 1. So this equation here is exactly like this equation. So it says that whatever the value of x is, or xy is already, add 1 to it and assign it to xy again. So here xy is initially 0, and when we increment it by one value, we add one value to it, its final value will be 1. And then if we do it another time, its value will be 2, etc. And here we are having the main function. In the main function, we firstly learned whatever that is in the main function is going to be executed. So if we have a function here and it is declared and defined, but it is not called in the main function, it is not going to be executed. So here we are firstly printing the initial counter xy. So we expect to see value 0 in the output because initially the global variable number is 0. Then we call the increment counter as it was asked here 2 times. So we mention increment counter and increment counter. So in the first round, let me just type it like this. In the first round, it will be something like this. Xy equals xy plus 1. So for the first call, it will be like xy equals 0 plus 1 because its initial value will be 0 and we are incrementing it by one value. So the final value would be 1. For the second call, xy equals 1 plus 1, which will be 2. Why? Because initially it was 0. Then in the first call, we increased its value by 1, so it's 1 now. So when we are calling it one more time, its value is now 1 based on this equation, plus another 1 that we are adding here. So the final value will be 2. So we expect that now when this function is called for the first time, it is going to print the xy value, new xy value to be equal to 1. And when we call it for the second time, it's going to call this function again and add another one value to the already existing value of the xy, which will be 2. So let me compile. Okay, great. So here we see that the initial counter is 0. Here we're printing the initial counter to be 0 because xy is a global variable and it is initially set to be 0. Then we are calling the function one time. We are calling the function. So we are adding one value to already existing value of xy, which is 0. So it will be 1. And we say counter after increment xy. So it will print 1. And then this block of code is executed and the program will go back here to execute the next line, which is increment counter for the second time. It comes back here. It is going to add another one value to the already existing value of xy, which is 1. So 1 plus 1 will be 2. So it is going to print 2. So this is how using global function will help us to access it through any function in the program. Thank you for watching and don't forget to practice it by yourself.